And I'm going to draw in my Aunt Pat right now because she just read this really cool article that really gets to kind of to me, like the ways in which we can begin to have some of these conversations, or another angle to look at these kind of conversations that we might find ourselves faced with. Particularly, I'm looking at Kathleen right now, and Megan, my sister educators here, who we are, and Amy with your daughter, you know, with Jules, you know, like, how do we have these conversations with our children, for those who are going to be leaders in our country soon to, you know, and are coming into their identities? And how do we create these spaces so that we can have these difficult conversations? We can open the waters up to have conversations around conflict, but also about resolution, and ways that we don't pour more salt into the wound, but actually find spaces of healing so we can begin to move forward. So I'm gonna pass it over to Pat, who you can maybe talk about the article a little bit, then segue into your story.
Oh, into the story. Okay, so good to know. Yeah, it was in the LA Times yesterday. I know, Amy, you get the LA Times, so you may have seen it already. I printed it out. After divisive election, it's time to open our ears, it says. And I thought, yeah, listen. So it turns out that there are a number of groups online that have for some time now already tried to bring people together of different points of view, different beliefs, different ethnic backgrounds, etc. Some of which took place at small group gatherings at Starbucks or coffee shops, some taking place in living rooms. One of them was called Make America Dinner Again, obviously occurring during the last 4 years, and meaning inviting people to the dinner table of these different backgrounds and belief systems. And in that situation, politics and religion were off the table. Couldn't bring those up because they would, of course, be the trigger hard-edged or hardcore beliefs, but to get to know people. That was the idea. And then there was something called the National Conversation Project. There's a Twitter called hashtag Listen First Coalition. I'm going to have Christina put a link to this article for you. I'm just letting you know what it is. So there are these, another one called One America Movement. Anyway, attempts to cross the divide. Lynn, what's the Rumi quote about, I'll meet you there? There are like two camps, and then somewhere in the middle between the two is where we can meet, something to that effect. Do you know what I'm saying?
Out beyond the world of right and wrong, there is a field. I'll meet you there. There is a field. I'll meet you there.
Perfect. Thank you. Because it's out beyond right and wrong. And where does that come from? It comes from judgment, right? Judgment. I'm right, you're wrong. Even though that may be true. No, I'm just kidding. Anyway, the point about it is to, in that statement, is the removal of judgment, because it comes from here and the other place is here that we need to come from. So this will lead into my story that I'm going to tell you now. So this is a story from, do this if you know who Rachel Naomi Remen is, raise your hand. Okay, good, so you wouldn't have heard the story. All right, except for you guys, all right. So Dr. Rachel Naomi Remen is a marvelous storyteller, and she's a teacher as well as being a doctor. And she realized that technology was not going to heal the world. It was not enough to heal the world. And so the way doctors were being trained was not good enough, because it was all about technology. And doctors didn't learn how to relate to people. And I think you maybe have had that experience in your own lives. So she began, she started a class that took place outside the actual university setting, because the university would not allow it. It didn't fit into their medical program. But as she continued with this class, people started coming, students, medical students started coming from all over the United States to take the class because they had heard about it. And so how she handled it will kind of come up within the story. So I'm going to use my notes because I won't remember enough if I don't. So anyway, she says a good story is like a compass. I think you mentioned that word, Lynn. A good story is like a compass. It points to something true. And the best stories remind us of who we are, what matters, what we can do, and what we can be. Mm-hmm. So the point of her story was about how to go about making a difference, to be a change agent. And she tells about when she was a little girl. When she was a little girl, she had a grandfather who was an Orthodox rabbi who was a student of the Kabbalah, which is the Jewish mystical tradition. And every Sunday he would come and babysit her, I think because the parents were off doing something. And so he would tell her stories, and he was just such a lovely man. You'll be able to tell from the story. So he told her a story that was called The Birthday of the World. In the beginning, there is only the holy darkness, the source of all life. At some point, this world, as we know it, the world of 1,000 things, emerged as a ray of light from the holy darkness. And then she says humorously, and then perhaps because it's a Jewish story, there's an accident. So many Jewish stories are like that. And the vessel that contained the wholeness of the world broke open, and the light of the world is scattered into an infinite number of sparks of wholeness, which fall into all events, all organizations, all people, and remain deeply hidden there until this very day. According to her grandfather, the whole human race is a response to this accident. We are all here because we are able to discover and uncover the hidden wholeness in all life's events and all people. We are able to tend it, to strengthen it, to lift it up, and make it visible once again. And by doing so, we are able to restore the wholeness of the world. And this collective task involves everybody. Everyone who has ever been, everyone alive, everyone who ever will be. In Hebrew, the task is, and I have to beg the pardon of those who are Jewish for the pronunciation, the task is called Tikkun Olam, restoring the world back to its original wholeness, healing the world. So according to the Kabbalah, every one of us is a healer of the world, and the Tikkun Olam is synonymous with the word service. And the story, of course, suggests that our ability to heal the world defines us as human beings. It is central to our human nature. It links us to the very purpose of our lives, and all of us are made in such a way that we can make a difference. She says, now Grandpa was talking to a very little girl. She says, I was 4 at the time. I wouldn't have understood words like restore and heal. So he used another language, a language that was a part of his own life. And he said to me, Neshumala, that must have been a kind of an endearing term, Neshumala. You can become a blessing. You can bless the life around you. And I understood this because my grandfather blessed me all the time. Every Friday, he would light candles and he would speak to God. And when he was finished talking to God, he would call me to him and he would put his hands on top of my head. And first he would thank God for making him my grandpa. And then he would tell God something about me that was true. And every week I would wait to find out what that was. And if I'd failed, he would appreciate how hard I tried. If I made mistakes during the week, he would mention my honesty in telling the truth. If I slept only for 5 minutes without my nightlight, he would celebrate my courage for being able to sleep in the dark. These few moments were the only time in my week I felt safe and at rest. Grandfather wanted her to discover our relationship to the hidden wholeness in the world, to develop an eye for it, and to understand my power with respect to it. Now, the next story he tells her has to do with, well, how do you do that? How do you go about being a blessing? How do you restore wholeness in the world? So she calls this a wisdom story from the same century, the 14th century, about the sustainability of the world. What will it take for the survival of the world? Which I think is a really great question right now, don't you? So this is a story about the Lamadvav. Again, apologies to those who speak Hebrew. In Hebrew, it means the number 36. A story, this is a story that was told to her again when she was very small. And what he told her was that the survival of the world depends upon a minimum number, at least 36 people in the human race who are capable of responding to the suffering of the world, capable of responding to the suffering of people they don't even know. And if this number falls below 36, the world will come to an end. And the experiment that is the human race is over. It will have failed. She said, I was about 3 or 4, and I was impressed. Who are these people? They must be very famous people if the survival of the world depends upon them. So I asked my grandfather who they were. I was sure he would know, but he didn't. And he said, no one knows who they are. They don't know who they are. So it behooves you to treat everyone as though they are one of the 36, on whom the survival of the world depends. And these people, they don't respond to suffering because they know the continuity of the world depends on it. They respond to the suffering simply because the suffering matters. This story made her worry when she was little. What did the people need to do? It must be something very hard if the whole world depends upon it, and if they couldn't do it. I asked my grandfather, what if they couldn't do it? What is it they're supposed to do? He laughed and said, Neshumala, they don't need to do anything. They respond to the suffering in the world with compassion. Compassion for people you don't even know is the foundation of the continuity of the world. For people who have a different language, a different name for God, people who share only a common humanity with us.